Hey guys, PIEGUYRULZ here, and if you watched my discussion video with Phoenix Pen, you will know that I found most of the episodes in In Too Deep to be disappointing to varying degrees. And even though I overall liked and enjoyed Gem Drill, I still have a problem with how this big major arc was resolved so quickly and in only one episode. And if that seems contradictory or difficult to understand, think of it like this. I enjoyed the episode, but in terms of the overall story arc, I feel like it wasn't long or grandiose enough of a conclusion to an arc that has gone on for a number of episodes. Now, I'm certainly not alone in this. I've seen a lot of people expressing online how they too feel that this should have taken at least one more episode and maybe a little bit more effort on Steven's part than his powers just conveniently kicking in when he needs them to. And almost always, whenever I see someone comment this, people reply back saying, "Oh, well, you were just too hyped up because of the In Too Deep promo," or "It's Cartoon Network's fault for taking so long to air the episode that you built up expectations in your head," or "You've been spending too much time on the Reddit and you've gotten used to so much speculation that you're expecting something much more grandiose," or "Oh, well, the cluster arc isn't really about the cluster, it's about Peridot." Basically, there's this trend, and not just with this aspect, but it's one example, of people dismissing any problem with Steven Universe as an issue of either you don't get it, or an issue of it's Cartoon Network's fault for airing schedule or promos or whatever. Now, here's the thing. Cartoon Network's promo and their lack of airing episodes for a long time did in fact help to build up expectations. However, Cartoon Network is not the only one to blame for setting the expectations too high. The show itself spent so many episodes building up to the cluster. The cluster was Peridot's whole mission in the first place, meaning that it was as relevant as far back as Warp Tour being the entire reason she came to Earth. And the cluster itself was first mentioned in Jailbreak. Then you have the forced gem shard fused experiments that popped up in Keeping It Together and Nightmare Hospital. And then of course there's the whole string of episodes right before Gem Drill. Catch and Release, When It Rains, Back to the Barn, It Could Have Been Great, Message Received, etc. So the cluster has traces of being built up from late season 1 and starts to get hinted at in season 2 as early as Keeping It Together, before we get to a whole bunch of episodes that explicitly build up to the cluster. So to see it be solved in just one episode, it doesn't seem right. It seems like a very long time of build-up and not enough payoff. But it's not just the frequency at which it's mentioned. Let's talk about how Peridot talks about the cluster. These are quotes from episodes, and you'll notice that she describes it as something that can literally put an end to the Earth. The show makes the cluster sound like a very, very big deal. We're not talking about some little problem like a monster running around. We're not even talking about Malachite. We're talking about something that will just instantly kill everyone on Earth. Perhaps if the show wasn't going to make such a big deal about Steven defeating this thing and do it in such a quick manner, they shouldn't have built it up in the way that they did. Maybe they should have made it so that the cluster wasn't going to destroy the entire Earth, just a section of it. Or maybe not have the characters constantly remind the audience exactly how high the stakes are here. They were definitely playing the cluster up as a problem the likes of which we've never seen before on Steven Universe. Basically what I'm saying is that the show itself hyped everyone up. There's evidence within the show that has nothing to do with Cartoon Network's promoting it, or the subreddit, or the fandom, or whatever, building up this conclusion that just doesn't feel satisfying for the buildup that we got. And this criticism holds true for the people that say, "Oh, well, it's about Peridot and not the cluster." I personally agree. The whole point of the cluster was more about Peridot in the end, but if that was the case, and it is, they should not have hyped the cluster up as much as they did. They should have presented the cluster as still being a threat, but a much less important threat. Really, all this needed to be was a two-parter, and I think myself and a lot of other people would have been satisfied. But that's the weird thing, because technically this is a two-parter. It's just that part 1 is completely randomly all about Malachite, which makes this problem feel even more pronounced. It's like they had the perfect opportunity to give us this epic two-part conclusion to the cluster, but instead decided to wrap up the other story arc that hasn't been mentioned for a long time. And it's so weird because they could have done the Malachite thing at any other time. You could have done this about 10 episodes earlier before the cluster even started, or you could have postponed it to being after the cluster was dealt with. I mean, at that point, it's been a lot of episodes since Chilitid, might as well push it to a few episodes later, right? And look, if you think Gem Drill was a satisfying conclusion to the arc, that's perfectly fine. I'm just trying to make it clear that the show itself did build this up. And even in a perfect world where Cartoon Network aired these things on a good schedule, I would still have an issue with how they decided to resolve this plotline. And hey, it's entirely possible the cluster might come back someday and we'd get a really satisfying conclusion then, but I think the few episodes after Gem Drill have made it pretty clear that we're not going to be seeing the cluster for a long time. Heck, Jasper might even show up again before the cluster's next appearance. Let me know in the comments what you think of the cluster arc as a whole. PIEGUYRULZ, out.